Hey, this is Brandon McManus, Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion, and you listen to The Scoop on alscoop.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, Season 5, Episode 4 of our alscoop.com podcast. I am John DiCarlo, joined by Kyle Gauss, Graham Foley, Matt Vender, Tom Magnuto, not with us today.
If you've seen Matt Vender, please let us know. We miss you, buddy. Come home.
Come home to us. We got a lot of football stuff to cover today, some basketball recruiting stuff, some mailbag questions. Kyle, what's going on in your world?
Nothing. Home improvements.
I thought you were drinking a White Claw for a second.
If I just leaned into this day.
It's a monster.
I'm not a big seltzer guy, I don't think. I think I get what people wanted for alcohol. Like that makes sense to me. White Claw makes sense to me. I think people are trying to convince themselves they like LaCroix and stuff.
Yeah.
Like seltzer water, no. But if I was going to drink seltzer, I'm all about Natty Light seltzer.
What?
Natural light
that's a thing?
It makes seltzers.
Ooh.
Oh, so I'm leaning into that. I'm missing out on Natter days. I'm missing out on Natty Seltzer.
I drank White Claw for the first time last night. Chelsea brought a couple home.
How was it? Did you start saying yes a lot and like
no,
in Instagram?
No. I had one. It was a crazy Monday night.
Yeah.
We're recording this on a Tuesday. But yeah, I literally thought that was a White Claw for a second before.
No, it's a Monster Energy drink. I'm leaning into the Kyle meme.
The Kyle meme.
Yeah.
So we are, as of now, today is, again, we're recording
April
this
20th.
on Tuesday,
August
April 20th. Did I say April? You said
I
April.
said it too, and then you repeated me. It's August 20th.
August 20th. 11 days from Temple's season opener against Bucknell. As you said, last week? You're like, or last week or 2 weeks ago, you're like, I am already looking past Bucknell.
Oh, yeah, I'm
you talking about stats, but
no, I actually looked up not Bucknell. I looked up Valpo stats today because their staff's from Valpo last year. And I am a buddy of mine. He said, you, like the rest of this team, should already be looking at Maryland. Fair enough.
So 11 days away as of today. Again, we're recording this on a Tuesday. Graham Foley was at practice for us today. This was the last of 6 practices that were fully open to the media. So more stuff stood out today. Again, one of the big storylines is Anthony Russo still day today, still not practicing. If you logged onto the site today and saw our stream on Periscope through Twitter, if you got a chance to read or listen to Rod Carey's post-practice media session, he did say that Russo got out there, worked out a little bit more, wasn't a full practice participant, but appears closer to playing, we'll say. In the meantime, Todd Centeo, Trav Betty continue to get more work. The offense moved the ball pretty well today. One of the things Rod Carey said was it's kind of a more or less a catch-22 situation. You love when the offense is doing well, but
It means the defense isn't doing too well.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's practice. If they practice 5 times a day, the offense, or 5 times a week, the offense is going to win 2 of them, the defense is going to win 3 of them. It goes back and forth.
where are you coming up? with those numbers?
Because that's literally what they practice a week, I think.
I don't know. I'm just teasing.
I think so. I think they might actually practice. Yeah, they practice 5 times a week.
Yeah.
I think they get 2 Wednesdays or walkthrough, and the Sundays are off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some good plays from the wide receivers today, according to what Graham saw, according to what he reported. His report is up on the site right now. Thad Ward, Temple's receivers coach, spoke today. We'll have a clip from him. Graham and the reporters who were there today got a chance to talk to Trayvon Williams. So Gabe Infante spoke today, talking about the running backs and how guys like Ramon Davis, Kyle Dobbins are coming along, Jagger Gardner, and how those guys are starting to flash, as we've mentioned before. Another single-digit awarded this one to Jovan Fair. So, again, we're creeping closer and closer to the opener. Again, the Temple should be... Is there a spread on this game already?
No, not yet, but I imagine when there will be, it will be 20+.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're Temple, you're hoping that you go up big, you get some guys some other work, and then you get the week off, and then you focus on which should be an interesting Maryland team. But let's talk first about, again, we'll talk about the receivers first. Again, we know about Isaiah Wright, know about Brandon Mack, some of these other guys, Jose Barbone, Jaden Blue. We've mentioned Jaden Blue before.
Sure.
He's got good hands. the practice that I saw last week. A lot of sideline routes, seemed pretty dependable, was catching a lot of stuff. Ronnie Stevenson's name starting to come up a little bit from the redshirt freshman from Montour High School outside of Pittsburgh. Bigger receiver, around 6'4", 6'5". Looks like he's starting to get more comfortable. Jordan Smith, also a redshirt freshman.
Redshirt freshman from Davie, Florida.
Yeah, so the next wave, I guess you'd say, of guys that you want to start coming along once Isaiah Wright moves along, once Brandon Mack moves along. So good to see some of those guys getting into the mix. The corners getting a lot of work today, obviously, and again, it looks like the offense had the better of the day in terms of moving the ball. A lot of the same stuff you're hearing about Isaiah Wright. Yep. Not only is he a dynamic athlete, but he's always in the right place at the right time. Rod Carey saying today that he's almost like having another coach on the field. Again, these guys seem to be, obviously with the practices open, whether it's us down there or Graham, we're seeing everything. And it's not, it'll start transitioning into this direction now where the next practice we see this coming Friday, I think that it's going to go back to seeing last 15
minutes.
Last 15 or 20 minutes, which is how it typically is as they get into game week prep for Bucknell and the rest of the season. And that's,
I think they literally get into Bucknell prep on Friday. I seem to remember Mike Yurimovich last week or 2 weeks ago saying, 10 days or 8 days before the game, we're going to be on Bucknell.
Yeah. And again, I get it. The fan base is going to be how they are with, well, these guys are a little different. I don't know if they have this East Coast feel. They've been pretty open about things. I can't remember the last time we had 6 practices completely open to...
I feel like Rule did it a little bit in the beginning, but I don't think it was 6.
No.
I think just occasionally.
No.
And Jeff Collins would do it occasionally during, he would do scrimmages at Franklin Field.
Scrimmages or the all-access thing.
Yeah, so he would do it. It wasn't the first half of the camp, the first 2/3 of the camp.
Yeah, and these guys have been, as far as we know, we're not entrenched inside EO as members of the team, but they've been pretty honest about what they're seeing, what areas they need to improve in terms of depth and stuff like that. But obviously, again, it sounds kind of nonchalant to say you don't anticipate any problems in the opener. The schedule is interesting this year, where you open against Bucknell, you have the week off, and then you get into Maryland and then Buffalo and then Georgia Tech, and the schedule starts to get interesting. But I guess ideally, you start fleshing out some of these areas where you look to Bucknell and say, okay, if Jagger Gardner can get 10 or 12 carries, bust off 60, 70 yards and a touchdown, then you start bringing in Kyle Dobbins, you start bringing in Ramon Davis. Is this kind of playing out how you thought it would, or were you expecting to hear other backs' names mentioned, or is this kind of how you thought things would play out?
No, I think that's kind of, I feel like the last year with running backs has been strange for us, because I think if you had talked to me in December when Lomé Diaz and Rod Carey stuff happened and Ramon Davis was on campus, I probably thought, okay, Ramon Davis has a shot to contribute right away. I mean, he had a Big Ten offer. He was an older guy. He had gone to a prep year. I could see him contributing right away. Then he wasn't eligible all of spring, so you don't hear anything about him. You don't get this. And then he finally gets to go ahead in the summer, and you start hearing more and more about him. And that's when I think that trio really started to flesh itself out. Like I've said before, I always thought Jagger Gardner, and I continue to think he's going to have a big role in this team just because he's a senior back, and you would hope that he'd have a big role in the team. Kyle Dobbins, highly recruited kid. Same thing. You didn't hear that much about him, and then he finally starts to piece it together. So this is kind of how, once we got into the fall, maybe after the first week, I thought he was going to pan out. Outside of that, the main thing I'm looking forward to in the coming days is next Monday we're going to get a depth chart, right, for the first time in however long. But most of the depth chart you could probably flesh out right now. At least the starters, there's very few spots on this team that I'm like, I wonder who's going to start there. The only possible exception is Karama Diabate is in a competition with Ifani
Maje, yeah.
I'm going to say that's how you pronounce his first name. They keep hearing
I feel
different
like
things.
they either give him the nickname of I've heard people say a couple different things, but Fanyi Maje. I hopefully we're pronouncing it right.
I think it's Fanyi Maje.
Yeah.
It's legitimately pushing Karama Diabate for that,
which is a good thing, because that's probably, for whatever it's worth, what we're saying. I feel like that's almost like a year sooner than we'd expect to be pushing Karama, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a guy that you probably thought, okay, maybe when he's a redshirt junior, he's the guy that was originally committed to New Hampshire, I believe. They flipped him, but they flopped Arnold Ebiketie as part of Jeff Collins' first class that they kind of hobbled together in a couple weeks. And he's a guy that he wasn't that big in high school. They made him put on 40-some pounds or so. And you maybe thought, okay, when he's upperclassman, maybe he has a chance to to make an impact. Now he's a redshirt sophomore now, and he has a chance. He's pushing a former 4-star senior defensive tackle for a starting job. So that's a spot where coming into the season, coming into the camp, you thought, okay, they definitely have to manufacture depth there, and it looks like they are.
Yeah, when I talked to Rod last week, it was kind of interesting. He was, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, yeah, he's in a battle right now. We were asking about Cromwell, but he didn't necessarily say it in like a punitive way. He's like, he's in it, but he's also on my leadership council. He's one of those guys that's an important voice in the room. So he didn't say it in this way where he's like, yeah, he's kind of huffing along. We need more out of him. It was kind of just more of like this is what it is vibe, which is a good thing, obviously. And then I think they need to see more of like what they're going to get from the defensive ends. Dana Levine says that, I'm going back to Friday now from Friday's practice when some of these guys were available. Dana Levine says he feels as healthy as he's felt in a long time, which is obviously a good thing for them. Quincy Roche missed practice today. Rod Carey said it was due to a personal issue, but he said he's right where he needs to be, so he's not in trouble or anything like that.
I think both those positions, the ends and the interiors, you're probably feeling pretty good about. Well, now with Ifeanyi Maja, you're feeling pretty good about the first 3 or so at those positions. It's who's going to be that 4th and 5th guy there. With defensive end, you got Quincy Roche, you got Dane Levine, you have Zach Mezde, who put together a pretty good junior year or senior year at the time before he was given a 6th year. Does DeAndre Kelly all of a sudden start contributing in his final year? Does Nick Maduri start contributing after the JUCO transfer from Dakota College? In the interior, does Chris Banks contribute right away as a redshirt freshman? It's that next level that concerns me a bit, because even if Cromwell doesn't win the starting job, he's going to play a lot. Like that defensive line is not a position, defensive tackle is not a position that you're saying, okay, I'm going to put 2 guys in there and I'll see you guys at the end of the game. You're rotating those guys in a lot. So be curious to see where the rest of that depth comes from. And that's what the depth chart will give us an insight into.
Wanted to touch on the safety position too. Again, I'm going back to, I was at Friday's practice, so that was after we recorded last week's episode, and Melvin Rice had a chance to talk for a while. Our first opportunity to talk to him since the spring, and again, like, I tried to write this the fairest way possible. I just asked him who's standing out at safety, who's been the most consistent. First name he mentions is Deshaun Winston. Now, I don't know if that means he's going to start. And I don't know if coaches might have the motivation to say Deshaun's been the most consistent player, but then maybe at the end of the day, Benny Walls starts. But Benny Walls is like the 3rd or 4th name he brought up. Brings up his name and just says that basically he's surprised everyone. Now that's a good. If that's a good sign for you if he starts to come along. He's one of your tallest or taller guys at safety. He's a 6'2" guy back there, and if that's legit and that's real, then that adds depth, that maybe adds a name that we're maybe a figure we might be a year away from mentioning his name.
Yeah, but that's the position, and you have a quote from Rice in here about that the safeties under Jeff Collins are different than the safeties under Rod Carey.
Right.
Where before they were kind of interchangeable, they're both being more flexible. In this one, you're almost having more of like a Brian Dawkins in the beginning of his career versus Brian Dawkins at the end of his career, where you almost play him closer to the lines, more like a linebacker. So I'm not quick to say, okay, Benny Walls is all of a sudden the 3rd safety.
No, exactly. That's what I was saying. I tried to represent it as best I could, but I don't know if it was the situation. Again, Melvin Rice's motivation could have been like, hey,
I want to reward a kid that's been showing up for the last 3 weeks. And I think Deshaun Winston has a good chance at starting. I think he's in a battle with Monroe for that other starting position, like across from Walls. It's just, do you lend a little more? Do you add a little more value to Monroe just because he is a guy he grad transferred here expecting to play? Does that factor into your decision? I don't know. Or do you just put the best guys on the field?
Getting back to the receivers for a second, again. Thad Ward spoke today. Again, we're recording this on a Tuesday. We want to play a little bit of a clip from his media availability today. Should we air the whole thing out here? Should we give people the full 4 or 5 minutes of him talking?
Give them
give the people what they want. Again, in case you haven't listened to or watched this clip on our site, this is Thad Ward talking today about the wide receiver position. He went on to specifically mention Barbone, Jaden Blue, Ronnie Stevenson, Jordan Smith, as I said earlier, some young receivers who've stepped up, in spring ball, in preseason camp. Knows what he has in Brandon Mack, knows what he has in Isaiah Wright. But again, these guys, it's always interesting to hear who the next wave of guys could be. Again, because obviously eventually I don't know. Maybe Brandon Mack has a hell of a season this year. Declares early.
He
I doubt it.
Monster.
Yeah. What did he have? 44 catches last
For
season.
600 and some yards.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the body size for next level. I don't know if necessarily the speed's there, but he could just be a bigger wide receiver.
Sure, yeah. But you get most likely one more year out of him. Isaiah Wright moves along. So again, here's Thad Ward talking about the wide receiver position and again some of the younger guys.
Fair to say, absolutely. Feel really good about this group right now. We're taking major steps every day. We inherited a talented group, no doubt, and these guys are really taking it on the onus on themselves to really continue to perfect their craft each and every day. And I think the best is yet to come from these guys. They're working hard, they're diligent, taking great notes. They've been better than spring hops.
For people who maybe look at it from this perspective, like, is it Big Ten type talent?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to put say Big Ten or whatever conference. I just think it's good talent, for every conference. It's talent, in this conference all over. I feel really good about our group and where we are. Yes.
Brandon Mack obviously got the single digit. How valuable has he been, his experience and his leadership so far with the wide receivers?
Brandon Mack has been awesome since I've been here. We got 2 single digits in our room. Mm-hmm. Really happy about that. Those guys are really taking that on, the leadership role, developing those young guys like we talked about. It's a big part of how we're going to continue the success here that we had in the past. But I've been really good, happy with Brandon and his performance, and he's been great, like I said, since I've been here as a leader and on the field.
Who are some of the young guys that you've seen step up so far?
Well, you got to consider right now, Jose Babone is young. He's had a really good camp. Jaden's played a little ball here, but he's young. I think he's got a bright future ahead of himself. Ronnie Stevenson is a guy who started to come on in the last week and a half. Jordan Smith, I got to call him out of this. I have nicknames, so we all have nicknames. But Jordan Smith has had a productive camp. He started that off in the spring, and it's gotten better and better and better. I don't want to leave guys out, but the young group as a whole has been coming up, stepping up each and every day as well. And it all starts with the leaders in our group.
Jaden Blue looked like he hurt his left wrist at one point in practice, taped it up, and he still caught a touchdown pass. Is he okay then?
That's just football. He's tough. Those things happen. Nobody's perfect right now. Nobody's 100%, but he's going to come back in and play.
How easy is it to coach a guy like Isaiah Wright, who's able to do so much on the field, but he's also running around with different groups and things like that?
Easy. It's always a challenge because those guys, all the great players you've been around, they all want to be coached. They all want that structure. They all want that discipline. They all want to be great. So you have to give the information to them that they want so they can be successful. So those guys like that, like Isaiah, the B-Max of the world, those guys, elite players, those guys want to be coached and they want to be coached hard. So easy, you have to be on every single day. They make you better, and that's what we want.
How about Trayvon Williams? He walk on for a long time now with his scholarship.
Love Trey. Trey's been awesome, man, since I've gotten here. Love everything about his grit, his attitude. He is the dog in our room. He's just personifies the toughness in our room, that walk-on mentality, that mentality that you need, that dog that you need to really to push and be great. Tough attitude, that's what he has.
You said no one's 100%, so at what point do you, as the coaching staff, decide to hold someone out of practice?
Right now we're at the point where we're going to step up, put our foot on the gas right now. It's time to go. About a week and a half out, it's time to pump it up, step it up even more. These guys are in great shape. What we do, the way we practice, they're going to be fine. Nobody will be 100% for the rest of the year. That's in the country. These guys, we know how to get these guys, back to life.
What have you seen from Randall Jones, someone else who could really, step up this year?
Randall, man, has been great. A leader, very smart kid, can play multiple positions. Just been great, can really run. I love where he's at. He's really good in the room. Again, helping the young guys develop, teaching them the offense, teaching them all the little things. That's what you have to have as a group. If you want to be elite group, you got to have your older guys take the young guys under their wing and then really help them with everything.
How much of this passing game is about creating matchups? Right? There's going to be a lot of movement. It seems like there's always motion with receivers.
Absolutely. It's always about matchup and trying to create the one-on-ones and then saying we're good enough to go in. And then that's what we try to do. You want to give your guys a chance to be one-on-one, and if we get a chance to be one-on-one, it's about going to win now. So, yes, it's about that.
So in another development, the next single digit to be awarded went to Jovan Fair. So obviously Jovan Fair as a guard, as an offensive lineman, cannot wear a single digit. But again, following in the mold of someone like Matt Hennessy, as an offensive lineman, gets the single digit awarded to him. We'll play a clip for you in a second. Jovan Fair talking about what that honor means to him. Cool story for him as a guy who is somebody who came to Temple from outside that traditional recruiting footprint, which could be a sign of things to come. Not just because Temple just recently got a kid from Chicago, from the Midwest, but actually with this incoming class, as long as they keep them committed,
Davis.
Sam Davis from Ohio, and why am I drawing a blank on
Demerick Morris.
Demerick Morris from Chicago.
Chi-Town, Windy City.
The Windy City, the windiest of all cities.
No, it has nothing to do with the wind, right?
Sure.
Windy City is about how the political climate in Chicago can change with the wind.
I did know that. Did I forget temporarily? Yes, I did. Now I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're pulling my leg again.
No, that's true.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So, Jovan Fair from Akron, right?
Yes.
So, arguably...
Rubber City.
Rubber City. What a gorgeous...
What a dump.
Gorgeous... I was going to try to be sarcastic and be nicer. What year was that?
2011?
11?
Yeah. It was a year before they came back to the Big East.
Yeah.
Dear God.
Remember you were covering that game? That guy was fidgeting with the window for an hour? In the
Yeah,
press
he knocked
box?
asbestos all over me.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I got a whooping cough. A dump of a town. Sorry, if you're listening, Jovan, I'm sure your hometown's very nice.
Gorgeous countryside. Anyway, arguably the best. Yeah, they've got some talent on that offensive line. You maybe a toss up between him and Hennessy is like your best lineman on that line. He talked about what that honor means to him and some of the other guys on that line. So we'll play this clip from today's practice. Just about how he talked about how it's one of the most cohesive units on the team, closest he's ever been a part of. So, and he talks a little bit about, again, some of the depth that's building out beyond. And we've talked about how a lot of programs in America will say, hey, we feel pretty good about our starting five. It's always about building out that sixth, seventh, and eighth guy.
Not that I think it's any less true this year, but I feel like I've heard that exact quote for the last 9 seasons.
Yeah. But here's Jovan Fair talking about that starting five, what the single digit means to him, and give some praise to guys like J.D. Gomez and Leon Pinto. So we'll play this for you.
We're very close. This is one of the closest groups I've been around. We're so like I could come to them for anything on and off the field. We have great chemistry. We go out to eat together, do everything together. We've really come very close over the summer. I added new guys and walk-ons that we've gotten over the summer, and just they've been like seamless, with the transition and the chemistry of it all. So it's been very good, real good. Like I said, we're taking a lot of big steps from the summer. I've seen a lot of progress. We've had Joseph Hooper, who is a JUCO guy who came in, and he's doing a really good job. J.D. Gomez has taken the next step. And Leon Pinto, those are 3 guys that I could see coming in, and if something were to happen to me, like God forbid, that would hold it down and, more than do their job. And we have a bunch of guys. David Gugu's doing a great job. It's good progress so far. It's great, especially being an old lineman. Getting that acknowledgement is a big deal because, usually you get to skilled players and those are the guys who were single digit, but for them to acknowledge the old line, and that's a great feeling. We have a great tradition of that, and it's great to follow in their footsteps of the guy that we had previously.
All right, so let's get back for a second to the guys that this offensive line is blocking for. Again, heading into the spring certainly, and then heading into preseason camp, that was the biggest question mark. Who's replacing Rockwell Armstead? As we've talked about for the last couple of weeks, now it's starting to flesh itself out a little bit. Perfect for them to open up against a team like Bucknell.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the team still facing the coming weeks will be tougher, but we've mentioned Jagger Gardner as the more upright, taller, experienced running back, a guy who has popped off some at least one, the program's longest run in the history of the program history. And now Ramon Davis starting to flash a little bit more. Kyle Dobbins starting to flash a little bit more. And then in today's practice, all sorts of guys got snaps. Tavon Ruley busted out a 70-plus yard touchdown run, as Graham reported. So you feel more confident about that position now, or is this a situation where you still have to see it to believe it before you can say, okay, there may not be a Rockwell Armstead in this backfield just yet, but
Right. Yeah, I think it's still a see it to believe it situation, but I'm more. I still think it's going to be a running back committee situation where you have 3 or 4 guys that consistently get carries. I just feel more confident about that committee than I probably did on July 15th. I think they each bring a little bit of a different thing. I think they're all good at catching the ball out of the backfield, which should be a big part of this offense. I'm glad to see that Kyle Dobbins is living up to his recruiting hype. Ramon Davis is coming in as more of a seasoned freshman. So, yeah, I'm still pretty confident. I still think it's going to be Jagger's show to begin with at least. But, yeah, like you pointed out earlier in the podcast, if they all of a sudden get up 28-0 against Bucknell and Jagger Gardner's had 10 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown, then you go, okay, good. Like you've taken that next step, and we can sit you down for the next 2 weeks until getting ready for Maryland.
Yeah, and obviously Gabe Infante, who was one of the top high school coaches in America at St. Joe's Prep, hired by Manny Diaz, survived the awkward transition of Manny Diaz being at Temple for all of 18 days. Temple retains him. He talked about Kyle Dobbins being a little bit more of a prepared back now, worked on his body a little bit more. Obviously, for all these guys, it's, okay, maybe they're starting to flash as runners. Can they pick up blitzes? That'll be something that you hear over the next few weeks. Are they going to be tested in blitz pickup against Bucknell as much
Probably
as they
not.
will be against Maryland, Buffalo,
I had a
Georgia Tech.
high school classmate that went and played at Bucknell. The
Bison.
3-year starter at like safety. Wasn't the most athletic guy in the
the fighting at Foley. So, but again, so just in the days to come, we should say, another Friday media availability for us, and then next week it'll be the weekly Tuesday press conferences.
That's it. And then we're cooking with gas.
We're off and running.
Season.
Off and running.
It's gonna be
there.
weird though. I'm sure they've done this before. It's gonna be weird covering a game and then 2 weeks off right away.
Mm-hmm.
The bye week right away is strange. I mean, I'm going to Margate the weekend in between, so that'll be fun. But
There you go.
yeah, bye week.
Say hi to Lucy.
Love that animal. Love that elephant. It's the only animal I've ever been inside of.
Are we keeping that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we're keeping that. You never fail to disappoint. Anyway, let's move on to some, before we get to the mailbag, we'll talk a little basketball. So here we are. It's August 20th. Temple has 3 scholarships to give for the 2020 class. One of them is taken up, obviously, with Jaleel White from Wildwood Catholic committing. 2 scholarships left beyond that. It'll be the next month or two will obviously be really interesting for Aaron McKee and his staff. Tosh Tweet has Temple, Florida, West Virginia, and Penn State in his Final Four. And then, did we talk about Mikael Jones last week?
No.
So Mikael Jones, you might remember, started off his high school career at Roman Catholic, then played at Girard College High School, transferred down to IMG Academy down in Bradenton, where he was coached by Bobby Jordan for a little bit. Bobby, we've mentioned his name before, was maybe under consideration for Temple staff, has now moved on to be an assistant at Wagner. But Mikael Jones now has Temple. He announced a Final Five of Temple, VCU, USF, St. Joe's, and New Mexico in his Final Five. So obviously when he verbally committed to Penn State several months back, Temple kind of drops out of the mix. Now they're back in it. Now, he talked to the Inquirer, talked to Phil Anastasia from the Inquirer last week, right?
Yes.
And said that he plans to visit VCU on August
You know what it
30th.
does? I just blindly say yes when I don't have an idea. But now that I'm
Really?
thinking about it, yes, he did speak to
That's
Phil
good to-
Anastasia.
that's
Let's
good
go.
to know.
Yes, absolutely.
Accountability and reliability, always
that.
your calling card.
But yes, he spoke to both of those yeses were accurate.
Yeah, so as of now, he's planning to visit VCU August 30th. Mentioned this on our message board last week. One source I've talked to who's familiar with this recruitment says that VCU might be in the lead here, but you never know how things. It sounds like the biggest cliche in the world. These things are fluid. Could he go to VCU on his official August 30th, and could they press him for a commitment? Could he commit? Possibly. As of now, he has official set for, again, VCU August 30th, Temple September 6th, New Mexico September 21st. He told the Inquirer that he's already taken an unofficial to USF, could take an unofficial to St. Joe's. It's in his Final Five while he's up and visiting Temple. So we'll see. He's 6'8", 210. I don't know that I would. I mean, he's athletic just like Taj. it's hard to say if they're similar or different players. I think Taj has a little bit more of an evolving jump shot
Sure,
than Mikal Jones does, but
I think if you're a pessimist, you're a little fearful with Jones that he was a guy that got big offers right away early on in his career. I mean, he had a Nova offer, he
Right.
had Penn State, and then since then, now you're competing with USF and New Mexico to a very small extent, and VCU. So you're wondering if maybe he hit his ceiling earlier than Taj, who seems like he's still on the upward trajectory.
yeah.
I think either would be. I think if you put a gun to a Temple coach's head today and said, would you take this guy? They would say, yep, absolutely. I think they'd take either of them.
Right. And then the third guy, I think they're looking at 3 guys for that one spot between Taj Tweet, Mikal Jones, and then Obina and Akili Keelan. Again, Temple had him in for an official visit back in May, right?
May or April. May.
May. And it seems to be, again, VCU in the mix there with him. One thing to note, again, these guys can take officials as juniors. They can also take official visits as seniors. So if it somehow behooved Temple to get Taj Tweet in for another official visit this fall, they might decide to do that. Nothing's on the books yet. They could do that with Obina as well. But those 3 guys, I think they're looking at there. Those are the 3 names to keep an eye on. Again, Taj has Florida in his Final Four. I don't know how viable a destination that is for him. I think if you're a Temple fan, you're more concerned about West Virginia, maybe Penn State. It'll certainly be interesting to follow over the next few weeks. I mean, there could be some of these guys, their recruitment could affect the other. Like if Mikal Jones goes to VCU the weekend of August 30th and commits, maybe Obina comes to Temple and says, hey, I'm ready to commit, you know.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. If West Virginia gets a kid, maybe Taj feels better about staying home. Hard to say. So it'll certainly be a very, very interesting next month, 6 weeks or so. I think ideally Temple probably would have wanted to get, I think they initially, if I were to take an educated guess, if you could have gotten Jaleel White, Taj Tweet, Dominguez Stevens as that shooter, you get a guy who can play on or off the ball like Jaleel, a wing like Taj, a biggish like kind of wing, and then a shooter like Stevens, but Stevens goes to Seton Hall. Now they have 1/3 of this class done. Like I said, I think we'll know more within the next month, next 6 weeks or so. Could be possible that I know fans don't love hearing this, but taking that 3rd scholarship, seeing what happens in the spring.
Roll over Beethoven.
The old rolling things over, waiting for a transfer, waiting for a grad transfer. We'll see how that works out. There could be some names out there. We continue to hear that they like Josh Banks, the guard down from North Carolina. We'll see how that plays out as well. As of now, I don't believe they have an official visit set with him, but that could be another name to keep an eye on. So that's where things stand for the most part with basketball recruiting. Before you know it, in a couple months, we'll be talking about what are you obsessing over with that
I was just
monster
reading
can
something.
there.
No, keep talking about basketball.
You're looking at the ingredients and grossing yourself out?
No, God, I don't care about that. My body's not exactly a temple. No, I was just reading. They put some little like a motivational thing in here on the Monster drink.
What do they say? You want to share it with us?
It's just talking about a new drink. They've been asking us for a new Monster drink, a little less sweet, lighter tasting, 0 calories, but with a full load of our Monster Energy blend. Sure, white is the new black. We went all out. Monster Energy Zero Ultra. It's delicious.
We just got our
on the bottom, it's
our first full unpaid sponsor.
On the bottom, I mean, I love the movie Role Models, and I always thought, was it Feed the Beast? Is that or Ride the Beast, or whatever it is? It really says Unleash. It's literally what Monsters is. So Unleash the Beast. And this is Unleash the Ultra Beast.
Oh God.
So.
Yeah, our new sponsor, except they're not paying us. Do you ever notice also that you drink out of the side of?
I do it occasionally. Sometimes I'll do that. It's I just don't like the pressing up against my nose too much.
There you go. Well, we'll delve into that more.
I don't
next
do it
week.
with like bottles. It's always with cans. I'm doing this fine.
There you go. Anyway,
it seems unnatural.
Yeah. All right. So we'll delve more into that next week if we remember that. Make a note of that. Kyle's Monster drinking habits. We'll go to the mailbag. We got a few questions here from the message board, a couple funny ones, one from Twitter. First question here from Rockland Owl. What is the status of the negotiations with the Eagles for the extension of Temple's lease for the 2020 and 2021 seasons? What was the deal to play when was the deal to play Bucknell signed, and what was the justification for the deal? So, as of now, Temple does not have a deal in place to play at the Link in 2020, 2021. That still obviously has to be negotiated. I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Yeah,
Otherwise, that'd be a heck of
What
a
are the
story,
alternatives? You could go in within a 35-mile radius. Where are you playing your ball if you can't renew with
but- Franklin Field, right?
Oh no, I'd just go more extreme with it. I'd be playing at like Abington High School. Just be like, screw it.
So you could walk the games.
Oh, that'd be so. That's a high hill. Have you ever been up Highland Road? That's a pretty steep incline.
You get there
Highland
just
Ave.
winded.
Whew.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
No,
that's
has
gonna
not
work itself out.
Yeah, I checked on that today. That has not been signed yet. Again, I'd be shocked if it, even if obviously not that Rockland now needs to have this explained to him, but even if they put shovels in the ground tomorrow for stadium, you don't have it for at least a few years. So, when was the deal to play Bucknell signed? What was the justification for the deal? The justification is, again, you're playing Maryland.
It was
Buffalo,
announced the same.
Georgia Tech, yeah.
It was announced the same day that they announced they were adding Maryland, Duke, and Boston College to the future
Right.
schedules. They also said, by the way, we added Villanova and Bucknell.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Yeah.
If you find me another Group of 5 level program that's expecting to compete potentially for a conference championship, that's playing 4 Power 5 out of conference teams,
Yeah.
then I would be shocked. I think going forward, this is exactly what you're expecting. You're expecting an FCS level team,
Right.
an FBS level team that's at like the MAC or Sun Belt level, and then 2 Power 5 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what you have this year. They're playing at least 2 Power 5 teams for the next couple of years. It's always going to keep being that way. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think ideally they would have wanted to play Bucknell bye and then Maryland. I think maybe you didn't want that bye as the second week, but it is what it is.
Well, but and again, not that this is obviously what you're thinking of when it's scheduled, but for this year's edition of the Temple Owls, not such a bad thing. You open up against a team where you can test out some running backs when you need to test out some running backs. Obviously, we were talking about this a few weeks ago. Now your starting quarterback, who you really like, is dealing with a calf strain, so
You can
maybe
play one quarter.
play one quarter,
Yeah.
one half, you get him out. You get Toddy some reps. You get Trav Betty some reps. Then you get a week off before you start getting into the nitty-gritty part of your schedule. So, again, as you already said, I mean, you're going to have an FCS level team on your schedule. Just
Sure.
is what it is. It's not like they're playing Bucknell and then 3 other non-conference cupcakes, you know.
It's like you look at the future years. So next year they play Idaho. Granted, when they scheduled that game, Idaho was still FBS and they hadn't dropped down yet. Did they drop? I think they're dropping down next year.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be an FCS team. Then you have 2 Power 5 teams at Miami, and then Rutgers is coming to the link, and you're playing a low-level FBS team like UMass. The 2 Power 5s and a low-level FBS team is already mapped out through 2023. I'm sure at some point you'll hear that they're playing other FCS teams for 2021, 2022, and 2023.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the standard everywhere. I mean, isn't Penn State opening up against Idaho?
I believe so.
So let's see. Penn State is opening up against Great radio. Don't care. Idaho. So Penn State's playing Idaho 3 hours before Temple's playing Bucknell. Then they're playing Buffalo. So they're playing very similar level things. Everybody kind of opens up against some bad teams.
Yeah. So,
Unless you're Miami, Florida, which is strange. It's playing on Saturday.
yeah, and again, this is not. I'm not trying to harp on Rockland out here too much.
No,
It's kind of funny, like, you know, again, after, you know, the fact that Temple has lost to Villanova a couple times, they lose, and then fans are like, why do you schedule that game? You have nothing to gain, everything to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're damned if you do damn. Okay, we'll put a team like Bucknell on the schedule instead. Well, it's not like Temple's on the cusp of getting into the college football playoff.
No.
They go 12-0. It's like, oh, damn, if they didn't play Bucknell, they'd maybe be one of the final 4 teams competing for a national championship. But just, again, as it works out this year, they're a perfect warm-up for you.
Right.
You should win by several touchdowns. And you get some running backs some work. You get to rest Russo, but that's just how it went.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the 2015 when they didn't play an FCS team in 2015, but I think when they scheduled Charlotte might have been an FCS team when they put them on the agenda. They always play an FCS team. I mean, Rules during some bad years, he lost to Fordham.
Yeah.
They beat the crap out of Delaware State. They beat Stony Brook. It's just always kind of there. They're supposed to be in an ideal world a bye on the schedule that counts towards your bowl eligibility and allows you to basically play a glorified scrimmage, but Watch how all this happens and Bucknell squeaks out like a 28-21 victory.
Oof.
And I'm just like,
That'll be fun post game.
oh, yeah. That'll be a good time. Good
Yeah.
time, great oldies.
Yeah. Anyway, next question from the mailbag, also from the message boards, comes from P. Furmai. Do we actually have a chance with Omarui? Wait, am I pronouncing it's Clifford Omarui? I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Now, he is referring to the number, as of last I checked, the number 55 overall overall player in the nation, the Rivals 150 for the 2020 class, from Roselle Catholic, former high school teammate of Josh, and I can't say for sure if
I don't think
he
he
played
played
with
with
Nate.
Nate. I think he transferred from somewhere else before, after Nate.
A big-time recruit, has offers from Kentucky, some other blue blood programs.
Sure.
He's coming in soon for an unofficial visit.
Unofficial.
So the question is, do they actually have a chance with him? Also, if the week decided today, do you think he would pick Temple? Thanks. I look forward to listening to the podcast. Do you think they actually have a chance with Clifford Omarui? No, I don't.
No, I don't either. I think the kid's, he's not taking official, he's taking unofficial. I think he's taking a lot of unofficials. He's going to Pitt during that time. He's been flirting with Rutgers. I think, end of the day, it's hard to say no to Kentucky.
Right. Yeah, and small victory that you're getting him on campus.
Yeah,
but
it costs nothing. For all you know, maybe you do wow the kid. Worst case scenario, there's worse things in the world to have a tweet from Adam Zagoria talking about how this 4-star kid is visiting your program.
Yeah. But again, and I don't think we're breaking any news here. Are the odds stacked against Temple here? Yes. Also, again, if Tosh Sweet decided today, do you think you would pick Temple? We kind of touched on this earlier. If he's deciding today, no.
If he's deciding 4 weeks from today.
Depends on what
That's what happens with other people.
Yeah. If he's deciding 4 weeks from today, we talked about this earlier. If he's deciding 4 weeks from today and West Virginia picks up a commitment during that time, I like Temple's chances. Penn State's a threat in that they're the Big Ten. I think some kids like to get outside the area and play at Penn State just as a gateway to the Big Ten. I'm sure if anybody were to, and I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form, I promise you I'm not saying that Aaron McKee, who knows what it's like when you've got a kid within those four walls. If I were recruiting against Penn State, what would you say?
That you're going to commit to a coach that won't be there anymore.
Correct. That's what I'd say.
Yep.
There's no stability there.
That would actually be bad for Temple, because here's what would happen. If he committed to Penn State, Chambers gets fired, all of a sudden he's going to get up as an LI in like March or April, when all of a sudden some of the bigger programs are going to have a scholarship they didn't expect. Yep.
And then he has a good senior season.
And then
Again,
he ends up at Georgetown.
And not to divert too much from the question here, but you have Jaleel White in the fold. Wildwood Catholic's going to be a real fun team to watch. They're going to be one of the top teams in New Jersey. They bring back virtually everybody. So they're going to go up against, again, the St. Augustines of the world, the Rainies of the world. They're going to be a really fun team to watch. So I agree with you. If again, it's all hypothetical. We're not saying this is going to happen, but if he did commit to Penn State, Pat Chambers loses his job. If Tosh Sweet has the senior season that you think he can have, and then you have some programs with a scholarship left and they can kind of just lean in and pluck a kid, he'd be in prime position there. So if he were to commit today, if he were deciding today...
If he commits today, I
think he's trying to get out of the area.
I'd say go to West Virginia if he commits today. But if he commits a month from now, and who knows, maybe Jameer Watkins commits to West Virginia or something like that.
How about that? That's interesting, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kid that Temple had its eye on. Heard from a couple people that he's a real good athlete, not sure how refined of a player he is, and he's again, it depends on who I talk to. Some people think he's good, some people think he's being over recruited at this point.
I mean, his Final Five looks like that of a player that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, he announced the Final Five at VCU, Seton Hall, St. John's, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia.
Yeah.
So if he all of a sudden says, okay, I want to be a Mountaineer, and he goes there, then all of a sudden are they cool and untouched Sweet, and all of a sudden maybe Tosh Sweet falls into your lap a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think you've got one kid in the fold.
Sure.
And this isn't fair to say, but you have the one kid who's committed to you is coming off of a torn meniscus and might have gotten some bigger offers if he didn't get hurt. You have another guy in the fold from the previous class who fell to you. Now, granted, you had to fight off some programs to get him because his coach got fired, and Josh Pierre-Louis.
Yep.
You have a couple transfers you brought in Ty Strickland and
Jake
Forrester, sorry, who are transfers, and we'll see how they do if they contribute. Neither one of them. This is probably an unfair barometer, unfair litmus test. In 3 games down in the Caribbean, neither one of them exactly lit it up. They might need to redshirt. They might need the benefit of a redshirt year. At some point, Aaron's gotta. This is his first real class, so to speak. And if he doesn't get it done, you can't pin this on Fran Dunphy.
Nope.
This is Aaron's class, so it'll be interesting. Now, obviously, this all comes out in the wash. If Jaleel White turns out to be the player they think he's going to be, then they look brilliant. If you don't get Taj Sweet, I don't think that makes or breaks the class. I think some people look at it that way because they've been recruiting him for so long. If you get Jaleel White and you get Obina, and maybe that third player is just a pure shooter, whether it's an international kid, let's say Jimmy Fennerty goes and plucks an international kid, the kid from Uruguay I think is still a long shot for them to get, or maybe that third player is a kid that you pick up in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you get Jaleel and you get one of these 3, whether it's Taj, Mikal Jones, or Obina, and that third player is maybe he's like a specialist, like just a real good shooter, I think it's a pretty successful class. But then I think that puts even more of an onus on 2021. You better
Which is supposed to be local.
You should get a couple of local kids, whether they are City of Philadelphia kids or whether they are regional kids. It's got to pick up at some point. So I think in an ideal world, the staff wanted to have their entire 2020 class wrapped up by the end of this month. Doesn't look likely to happen, but again, as I keep saying, these next 6 to 8 weeks are going to be really interesting. What do you think? What constitutes a successful class to you?
No, I would agree. I think, like you said, it's a lot easier to swallow if Taj is the one of those 3 because, you identified him when he was a sophomore. You on paper, beat out some schools like West Virginia, Florida, Penn State to get him to stay relatively local. I think if it's somebody like, and this is by no means a shot at either of them because I can't tell you I've been a gym rat watching Obina or Mikal Jones play in the last 12 months. If all of a sudden it's Obina as that one, and you go, okay, well, you beat out VCU, and there was a little bit of interest in West Virginia, but they never offered, even though he was in their backyard, then maybe it's a little harder to swallow. Maybe it is a little bit of, okay, this is similar to a Fran Dunphy recruiting class. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when I look down on November 1st what the class is going to look like. When I looked down on October 1st of last year, they had nobody. Damian Dunn hadn't committed yet. Josh Pierre-Louis was committed to UNLV, and then that class ended up, at least it seems like it ended up getting some immediate contributors. So I would agree. I think the next 6 to 8 weeks are going to be very interesting. I don't know.
And I think in the future, again, this sounds like such an obvious thing to say, and I think I'm kind of speaking for, this is a lot of what you hear from the fan base. At some point, it's got to start to get, maybe easy is too easy of a word to use, but at some point, it's got to start falling into place a little bit sooner instead of depending
what was the
upon
last easy recruitment they had? Erasmus Parks.
Ugh, well, yeah, but we actually have a mailbag question about Erasmus Parks, right? Yeah, again, it's probably not the right word to use, but at some point it's like going out and getting this priority target
Sure.
instead of leaning on so many other
I think
variables.
Damian Dunn was a priority target last year, but they had to wait until October to get him. They had to fight off late interest from Georgia Tech and
again, it may not Georgia Tech, Florida State, VCU, and again, this is a small sample size, but who ends up going down and playing well in the Bahamas? Damian Dunn. So we'll see. Definitely be interesting. Next question comes from Berkshire Al. I seem to remember, maybe incorrectly, that Taj Sweet had an August deadline on his Temple offer. Is there some sort of timeline for his offer? No, I don't think so. I think, again, I think if you're Temple staff, you probably did want to have things wrapped up by now. But if a couple of things fall into place, again, we have exactly 11 days left in the month of August. Even if Taj goes out and takes a visit to West Virginia and he takes a visit to Penn State and he still hasn't committed and some other dominoes fall into place and he comes to Temple midway through September, they're not telling him to get lost.
No.
So no. I think there was some chatter, Berkshire Al, that yes, that Temple maybe wanted to get things wrapped up by now. So I don't know that you're necessarily remembering that incorrectly, but
Yeah, I just think the dynamic changes when he gets late offers from like West Virginia and stuff like that.
sure.
Like it's if he hadn't received any new interest in the last 3 months, then maybe at a certain point you go like, "Ah, man, what are you waiting for?" Like,
Yeah.
shit or get off the pot. But now
Yeah.
that he's getting,
And again, I think West Virginia is the key here. I'm not trying to rule out Penn State either. Again, that's an intriguing option for kids who want to get away, and they say, again, maybe it's good enough for someone like Taj, or maybe it was good enough for a guy like Lamar Stevens or Tony Carr. Like, yeah, maybe you don't know what Pat Chambers' future is, but I get to go play in the Big Ten.
leave about 18 months too early and go play in Europe.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But no, I don't think that there's an August deadline on this, especially with August being 11 days from being over. But again, as we keep saying, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks. Next question comes from Esther Boyer from the message board. With so much being said about Coach McKee's emphasis on pace and the dearth of talented big men anywhere near the program, how has Arashma Parks looked recently? His style of play doesn't seem like a good match for the new system, but we could use all the help down low we can get. I think Arashma's still a project. I think the one thing Arashma has going for him is that when you talk to his peers about him, again, take it for what it's worth. Talked to Jake Forrester about him a couple months ago. Now, granted, they're tight. They're both PSA Cardinals guys.
Yes. Are they both? They're not both West Town guys, are they?
Arashma played at the Phelps School, I believe.
Okay.
But they're friends. They're close. And Jake, I remember asking him about Arashma. I was like, what about him? I said, his name's starting to come up. He goes, I'll just kind of let his play speak for itself. The one thing Arashma has done is drop a lot of weight since he's gotten here. If you see him
They're
walking
both
around,
PSA guys.
yeah. So if you see Arashma walking around, he is skinnier than he used to be. I still don't think he's a super overly athletic guy. There's some quiet optimism around him from a couple of the guys you talk to, and you say, like, he could be a guy who just outworks people down low, a little bit of a banger. Again, I still think he's a little bit of a project. He has to prove that he can stay healthy. I don't know that he's going to be a guy that's going to run the floor constantly. To that point, we've also talked about this too. Do I think Aaron wants to play with pace? Do I think he wants to push the pace? Yes. But again, I think you have to
rebound.
Well, you have to rebound, but you also have to, just because they chalked up X number of shots down in the Bahamas doesn't mean that it's going to be like that all the time. I would say there's a little bit more intrigue about Arashma than there was a couple years ago, or even last year.
Right.
I think he's gotten himself into better condition. I think a lot of people have gotten themselves into better condition. So I think there's a little bit more of a glimmer of hope. If he turns out to be a decent role player, I think that's a win for you. When they first recruited him, there were a couple people, to be honest with you, and I'm not going to name names, who said, I'm not sure what they saw in him. And obviously, if you're a Temple fan, you don't want to hear that. But I think he's come along a little bit. I think he's worked hard. Again, he's dropped weight. But I don't know that if they do choose to run as much as they think they can, I don't know if that necessarily takes him out of the mix because, as you said, you have to rebound.
Yep.
You're not always going to be able to run. So if you do get into more of a half-court game, he gets in there as a 5 or 10 minute guy and grabs a couple rebounds for you, that's a win. So
yeah, and the other thing is, you did hear a little bit in the spring about once he was getting back from that shoulder surgery and he was starting to play a little bit. And there was the talk, Fran Dunphy did himself no favors by mentioning that, Rashma's going to determine whether or not he redshirts. Like, it became the kind of the Khalif Wyatt situation again, where you're like, well, no, you got to make some of these kids redshirt. You heard towards the end that Rashma was all of a sudden shooting a little better than he had been before. And this is a guy that, when he was on the AAU circuit with PSA, was a pretty atrocious shooter from the free throw line, didn't attempt any threes. So who knows, maybe he ends up becoming a role player that can rebound that. When you are in out transition, kind of becomes that trailer that can shoot a little bit as a big. You never know.
Yeah. A couple more questions here. These ones from Twitter. We'll end with the funny one. This one from Christian Evans on Twitter. Crazy to think next week we'll be doing game predictions. In the meantime, which freshman or redshirt freshman has the biggest impact at receiver this year?
At receiver? I've been on this train for a little bit, and I heard nothing today that would lead me to believe that's not going to be the case. I still think Jose Barbon's going to have a role on this team. They mentioned, Trayvon Williams mentioned today that they could play 7-8 guys a game at wide receiver. I think he's one of those 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
And Jordan Smith, I think, has the athletic ability to eventually work himself into a role, too.
What do you like about Barbone? You think he's a slot guy? You think he's an outside guy? You think he's...
I think he's primarily a slot guy, but I think he has the ability to work outside when need be. He was I like production. I like numbers. He was very productive at Conestoga Valley. He's a 2-time All-State wide
That's
receiver.
what makes you unique.
Yeah.
I like production. I like
I like production. I like people that are good at sports.
Yeah.
And I think he's that guy. I think he has the track record to show it. And no, I think he has the ability to I think this is a team, and I mean this differently than the guy that was here the last 2 years. I think there's versatility in their wide receiver positions.
Right.
I do think they move people around a lot.
Position, flexibility,
I think you're
global approach.
I think you're going to see more, maybe not for Jose, but maybe for somebody like a Jaden Blue or something. I think you're going to see more running out of the slot too and stuff like that, whether it's jet sweeps or quick pitches or anything like that. So I think his ability to kind of go in and out is going to find himself a role.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, his name just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, not just from the coaches and players.
And that's a lot of it, right? Like a lot of it when it comes to these spring practices and fall practices, whether it's football or basketball, is a lot of times when these names come up unsolicited. Look, you and I have watched a lot of football, watched a lot of basketball, but we're not professional scouts, right? I can't tell you the difference between a guy running a 4.5 and a 4.6 with my eyes. What I can tell you is you don't hear Kyle Dobbins' name all his freshman year, and then you start hearing it in the spring. You start hearing it more in the fall. That's usually just more of an indication that things are coming along, and that seems to be happening with Jose.
We talked about before. I mean, for a few years, Nate Harrison's nowhere on your radar. I remember
he got kicked off the team.
And then it was like was it a Friday night game or a Thursday night game when he was playing receiver? He had a chance to dive for a ball, a deep throw, and he dropped it. And then next thing I know, a couple years later, Matt Rule's telling me, I'll tell you who's really starting to come around, who could be a future pro, Nate Harrison. I was like, really? And then I felt stupid for saying really because I'm like, well, I'm not a coach.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, he's just really started to come around. He's become a better football player. He's become more coachable. So not to say that Barbone had any issues. I mean, he's still a couple years into his career. But again, as you say, you just start listening. His name keeps coming up. Hassan Reddick's name kept coming up after a while. Again, it's not to say
Hassan Reddick, you and I can. It's the old Al Golden quote. My wife could have told you that. Hassan Reddick
for the first couple of years, no. You're like,
then you have that stretch against Memphis where he has 4 straight tackles for a loss or whatever,
right.
and you're like, okay, I see it.
Yeah,
or in the bowl game win where he dropped into cornerback and ends up your starting defensive end dropped into coverage.
Yeah, but as you said, in our business, it's when you start to hear someone's name get repeatedly mentioning, it's not just lip service. Sometimes you can tell when a coach is trying to throw a guy a bouquet, and you're like, all right.
It's usually when his teammates start to bring him up a little bit too.
Yeah. So I would agree with you there. This last mailbag question comes from our friend Andrew Albert. So this comes from.
There's another one on the boards.
Oh, there is. Yeah. We'll get to that one first. What's the one on the boards?
The one on the boards from Green Street Al. It says this is the ultimate slow period question, but it pertains to basketball. As a lifelong marketer, I'm curious about how traffic has picked up on the basketball boards and the site overall since McKee took over and has us headed in a different and much more positive direction. Any analytics or anecdotes you could share about Aaron or the program? I don't know the analytics of the site. I can tell you the podcast is up. The podcast, and this is to all of our loyal listeners, the podcast is up a lot over now versus where it was 18 months ago, 24 months ago.
Yeah.
So there are positive numbers.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen more than the listenership is more than doubled, more than tripled on some occasions. I would say that it just is what it is. In saying this, there was a coaching change. There's a reason for optimism. For several weeks, we're giving you a lot of basketball coverage, a lot of
it's not a coincidence that our most listened to episode of all time with The Scoop is when we broke the Josh Pierre-Louis and Jake Forrester news,
and we didn't have a guest on that.
No, it's just us talking. It's I don't think we had any audio. It was literally just we teased it. People were dying for basketball recruiting news, and it blew our metrics out of them.
Yeah, and I teach a class at Temple in addition to working at Temple, teach a sports writing class, and I talk to my students all the time about the what's next aspect of sports. We all want stuff to look forward to in life, and there's always that what's next. Who are we getting? Who's Temple recruiting? If you're an Eagles fan, they're already looking at mock drafts for next year. You're right. When that news came out, it was just a breath of fresh air, some newness. So, yes, the metrics have definitely gone up. The podcast listenership, like I said, has doubled in some weeks, have tripled in some occasions, a lot more downloads. We appreciate that.
I need somebody from North Dakota, South Dakota, and Alaska to listen to the podcast.
Yes, and those are the 3 states.
So if you know anybody from there, then I can start marketing us as listeners from all 50 states.
Yes. So this final mailbag question, it started off as a different thread. Graham tweeted out a picture. There's been all this talk about like Popeye's chicken sandwich. So
if you ever need a basic idea of like where social media is, like wherever the in vogue like haha meme is, just go to Graham's Twitter because he's like the target demographic and he buys into it every time.
But he knows how to build some traffic
by posting a photo of a chicken sandwich.
And he gets engagement on his posts.
It's just yeah. I'm just saying like he's whatever the in vogue trend is, Graham's on it.
So last week, Andrew Albert, friend of ours, I'm in a group chat with him, and he starts raving about he says, I ate the Popeye's chicken sandwich, really liked it. And so this was last Friday night. My wife is planning to leave on a Friday night to go stay at her mom's place, at my mother-in-law's place. They're going to go down to the beach the next day. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'll go out and make a bad food decision, and I'll put this to the test. Chelsea leaves. I drive straight over to the Popeyes on City Line Avenue, which is like...
That's your go-to bad food decision?
It was like 5 minutes from our house.
But that's like when you're like, you know what? Wife's gone. Johnny's off the leash.
Literally.
You go to Popeyes?
Only because it was timely, because we'd literally just been talking about it. This was not like necessarily a premeditated thing for a couple of days. They were talking about it. And so I'm talking about it with Andrew, with Ari, with our friend Jeff Nyberg, who's now working for Gannett down in Wilmington. And I said, all right, I'll go give it a try, because I know my wife will make fun of me if she's still home.
Sure.
Drive over to the Popeyes on City Line Avenue, and I pull up, get to the drive-thru, and like, can I get a chicken sandwich? Like, we are out of chicken sandwiches. I'm like, you're out of chicken sandwiches, and I'm sure this guy's probably like, dude, I got a lot of it's like that scene. I got a lot of tables, like Janine Garofalo and Cable Guy.
There were no straws then.
There were no forks in medieval times. Therefore, there are no forks at medieval times. Something like that.
There's no forks. We have Pepsi.
Got a lot of tables, man. Anyway, so I panic, and they're like, "Is there anything else you want?" I could have just calmly said, "Nah, I'm gonna go home and just pull my car out of the line." I'm like, give me the 3-piece meal with a side of mashed potatoes. And so I'm texting with those guys, and I was like, they don't have a chicken sandwich. I can't put this to the test. Like, what'd you do? I was like, I ordered the 3-piece chicken meal instead. They're like, oh, wow. So I was like, I get home, and I was like, well, I'm going to chase this down with some Pepto just in case this, kicks things up.
That's what that was.
And so then Jeff McDevitt, who's a social media maven in and of his own right, with all the Open Challenge stuff. Jeff's working for the WWE now, right?
Yeah, the Open Challenge is dead. Long live the Open Challenge.
Although he's occasionally come home.
I think he came back
right?
once for it.
Yeah. But Jeff is doing social for WWE right now. Another Temple grad, hilarious individual. So he put something out on social media the other day, I think on Instagram, and I responded to him. I said, here was my failed attempt, and I go out, and he was chuckling at me and saying, like, yeah, you should just pull that line. But instead, I, bring home like a 3-piece chicken meal with mashed potatoes, and then Sam wouldn't leave me alone because he smelled chicken.
So this is a 5-minute
I know. So anyway, Andrew says, we start this thread on Twitter, and I tag you guys. You respond with McDevitt responds with a tweet that says JDC be like, and it's a guy throwing Pepto into a cup and chugging it. Then you respond with a tweet that says, hey Siri, where's the nearest public bathroom to the Popeyes on Girard? That's where I guess you figured I was going, but I went to the one on City Line Avenue. Then I said, let's take this energy over to the Al Scoop podcast mailbag, gents. So then Andrew responds, hey Johnny, first time, long time, which works better, pre-treating with Tums or symptom-based Pepto? I'll hang up and listen. I'll throw this out to you as a guy who's made his share of bad food decisions.
Oh, yeah. My life is nothing but bad food decisions. I think they're different. I would you use Tums for upset stomach. Use Tums for like heartburn.
Yeah.
I use Tums if like.
What a way to! I'm sure we'll take some heat for this.
If maybe I drank a little too much the night before and I had heartburn or something, yeah, you take some Tums. I like the chewable Tums. You just chew it.
Yeah, I'm right up
good.
there.
Yeah. I like that. But as far as I know I'm about to dance with the devil and get a little bit of bubble butt going on, then you go Pepto. Pepto just locks you up for about 24 to 36 hours. When it finally does come out, it looks like a failed science experiment.
Oh, Kyle.
But no,
come on.
I'd say different scenarios. Right, you use the right tool for the right job.
Speaking of our podcast metrics,
yeah,
they're going to go down the toilet next week.
Oh, man.
Because of the way we're ending this.
Poop cells.
Andrew, I would agree, buddy. Pepto. We always bring Pepto on road trips, right?
I I don't know about
because the
regular
quality of
road
food you're going to hit, like for somewhere on the New Jersey Turnpike,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like BC Army.
Yeah, I always do it for with my real job. I spend a lot of time in Wisconsin. Every time I go in Wisconsin, I know
Cheese curds.
I'm gonna drink a lot, and I'm gonna eat cheese curds, and it's just gonna be constant. And I know the place that I spend most of my time at, like what I'm out there for, has very bad toilet paper, so I always bring Pepto. Last time I brought baby wipes. I was just like, you know what, I'm
man.
leaning into this, but no, you just gotta do Pepto because it's just it's a bad experience. I'm too old to be dealing with this. Like, let's just see where the day takes me. My GI track's not as great as it was when I was 25. As I'm sure our demographic, our target listener can relate to.
Oh man, yeah. Well, yeah, I would agree. Symptom-based Pepto. I like the terminology.
So
there.
is he saying after you get an upset stomach, then you chug the Pepto?
I guess I'll have to follow up with him. Maybe we'll let that. We'll let that carry into next week. But yeah, what a
Don't
way
worry.
to-
Next week we have actual game day preview.
Yeah,
I'll take you through a Bison team whose offensive line I think averages 265 pounds.
is it really?
That's what I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Andrew, if you have a follow-up question for next week, we love you for submitting a question. What a way to end the podcast this week. So yeah, I would agree. Pepto is always better than Tom's. Very rarely. What's Graham texting us? Anything of importance? No. Okay. All right. Well, that'll do it for a very interesting and unique episode of The Scoop this week. Thanks for tuning in again next week. Things kick into action again. We'll be recapping. We'll be previewing the Temple Bucknell game, as Kyle said. We do have one more media availability scheduled for this week, this Friday coming up. So we'll have one more media availability where we can get some interviews and questions in. By next Tuesday, it'll be the start of Rod Carey's weekly Tuesday press conferences, the Monday weekly media teleconferences. So probably have a little bit more. Let's end this with a real quick question. I know we typically end on the mailbag. Do you think by this week Anthony Russo's still day to day, or you think Rod Carey's saying like, no, he's good to go?
I think he's good to go. I think if it was just Collins, he would still be day to day. You wouldn't even know he was day to day.
That catastrophe
No,
against Notre Dame, where he's like, all three guys are going to play, and
And then what was it, Maryland or Boston College, where all three quarterbacks started? Remember
yeah,
that? One was like two fullbacks and a quarterback.
Sheriff and his gimmicks.
I mean, he was running after practice today.
Yeah.
I think you'll probably hear towards the end of the week that he's practicing. And I don't think Rod Carey's the type of guy to be like, well, let me do gamesmanship against Bucknell. I think when you get that depth chart on Monday, it'll say Anthony Russo starter.
Yeah, I agree, and we've said this already. We have not seen Rod Carey in the throes of a Temple season in a not that Temple gets covered like the Eagles or scrutinized like the Eagles, but we have yet to see Rod Carey in the throes of a season in a top 5 media market as opposed to DeKalb, Illinois, which is close to Chicago. But anyway, so far he's been pretty practical. He's been pretty straightforward with stuff. So I agree with you. I don't think you'll hear too much gamesmanship at this point. But again, something to keep an eye on. So again, next week starts game week and getting into the season. So looking forward to getting into the season with you guys. And thank you for listening. And we will talk to you next week.